So let's see. It just takes a few seconds to do it,
Sure.
but I'll get a pop up when we're live. Um,
No worries.
okay, perfect. Yeah, we're live. So need to get out
Hello.
of the full screen. Okay, perfect. So yeah. Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Everything Geek podcast. I'm your host, Rory, and joining me today is a very special guest. We have Tom Konkle, best known for playing Moff Isdain and Villager #1 in Star Wars Tales of the Empire, Budwin Yacker in Safety Geeks SVI, Grim and Ask Grim, Roland Drake in Trouble Is My Business, Matthew and Apostle Peter in The Last Supper, Albert in Noise in the Middles, himself in The Art of Football from A to Z, Irish Guy and the Leprechaun in Be Cool Scooby-Doo, and the Local Pedestrian Population in Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2. Tom's behind-the-scenes credits include creator, director, head writer, executive producer, and editor on Invention of Brian Forbes, creator, writer, producer, and editor on Safety Geeks SVI, director, writer, executive producer, and editor on Trouble Is My Business, a writer on Ask Grim, and a writer on Be Cool Scooby-Doo. How are you today, Tom?
I'm good, and I'm tired after hearing all that. It makes you tired.
Yeah. Yeah. Thankfully, my voice still feels fine, but yeah.
That's a wonderful introduction, and it does make me, Rory, it makes me really grateful that I've had the experience of not only being able to work as a performer and enjoy creating these characters, and I'm a complete geek myself, so I'm creating stuff that I love, but also to actually be behind the scenes and creating these things as well. I've always lived in both worlds. I've been, since I was 20 years old, I've been working professionally as an actor, but I've always been into the gear, the technical, and the creative side of it as well. In fact, the running joke was when I moved to Los Angeles, I was directing a sketch comedy TV show pilot. And I did sketch comedy for many, many years. And I'm directing it. And so I get up on stage and I'm showing the other actors, like, then you say this, then we do that. And everyone's laughing. They're like, why aren't you in this? So it was one of the few cases of a director moving back into acting instead of the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And of course, in the introduction, as an Irish guy myself, I had to mention the Be Cool Scooby-Doo, Irish Guy
Yes.
and Leprechaun, you know?
Oh, absolutely. I loved doing that show. That show was a funny sort of Monty Python take on Scooby-Doo, and I was one of the staff writers of the thing. But they also knew that I professionally did a lot of voiceover and that type of thing. And so there was a couple little parts where I was like, please, can I, try it? Because I had it in my head how I wanted to do the character. And so I ended up being able to act in a couple of them. And then one episode I did, Mark Hamill performed in, and I had written the part for myself. It was this thing called Area 51 Adjacent, the episode. And I'd written this one part for myself, and I put all this comedy into it and lavished all this attention on this one role. And of course, Mark was like, that's the one I want. So, it's Mark Hamill. So I had that, but it was fun because it's not often that you can say, wow, I wrote something that Mark Hamill performed on television. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I mean, if you were
Yeah.
going to like defer a role to
Yeah.
another actor, it's like
Yeah. I was like,
Mark
sure,
Hamill.
yeah. Yeah. And he's such a great voice actor. His Joker and so many, he has one of the biggest voice companies out here. And he's so talented at it as another career. That I was just thrilled, that he would want to do a part that I had written. And I'm proud of that show. Be Cool Scooby-Doo is really well written, really anarchic, and has some genuinely funny jokes in it.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So, can you tell me a bit more about how you got into acting and filmmaking?
Sure. Speaking of Star Wars, I think I was 10 years old, and I went to go see Star Wars with my parents, which shows my age. But I remember driving back from seeing it, and as as a child, I'd always entertained myself like creating all these little characters in a tape recorder, or my dad got me a Super 8 camera, and I did, all kinds of these little battles and stop motion and stuff. But after seeing Star Wars, it was such a different film and such an experience, especially, for boys, seeing that kind of mythology and seeing that world and what you could create. I was driving home with my parents, and I'm an only child, so it's just me and my parents. And I'm 10 years old sitting in the back of the car, having seen Star Wars, and I go, I'm leaving. I'm going to Los Angeles. I'm gonna go make movies. And my parents are looking back at me, this 10-year-old, and they're like, well, what are you gonna do about us? And I said, oh, I'll put you in the home. You'll be fine. You'll be taken care of. But and I did it. The day after I graduated, I started packing, and I left a month or two later, and I drove across country, not knowing, who was here or what I was running into. So I knew I had about 5 days to get across the country and enough money to live for about 2 weeks. I was really young, and so I packed everything I owned into a car, and I drove across America. Made it in about 4 days, and then started looking for a place to live. And had I not found a place to live, I would have been on the street. Because I didn't have any family, I didn't have anything out here. I did have some friends that did come out, and I did make a lot of friends once I was here. But I mean, that's the sort of thing you do when you're young. You just hang it out there and you try something. But Star Wars was a big, that Blade Runner, so many of the genre films. The first R-rated movie I ever saw, which is ironic, was Mad Max. And ended up the first feature I ever directed had Vernon Wells from The Road Warrior in it. So my life went full circle. But once I moved out here, as I'd said before, I started working more behind the camera because I thought, oh, acting, is too hard. I had certainly done acting in college, done a lot of live shows. I know stagecraft. I'm stage trained. But I was like, it's too hard, doing commercials. Well, it turns out that ended up being my day job towards the end of the 90s, and I've been doing it almost 28 years now. And I straddle both of those worlds. And I think that was really the start of a lifelong sort of love affair with cinema and acting and just everything. Audio, wherever I could tell a story, create characters. I was a huge fan growing up of Peter Sellers and how he was able to create so many different voices and characters. And 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 I tried to kind of recently get back in touch with that with these Mindstream Radio Reborn shows I've been doing, because when everything sort of shut down with the pandemic and everything, I didn't have that outlet of acting in television or commercials or making movies. So I went back to my roots, and just like that kid with the tape recorder, when I saw Star Wars, I started doing audio fiction with Mindstream, and I did a funny version of Flash Gordon and a funny version of Scrooge, and it was so much fun in the last few years that it's been really rewarding to get back into it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. Can you tell me how you were originally cast in Star Wars Tales of the Empire?
Yes, that was a dream come true. It's one of these things where the 14-year-old you was like, "What?" You can't believe it. I will say it's one of the few things I never auditioned for. I have a voiceover agent. I'm with a company called Imperium 7, and I do auditions all the time. That's how I did, Red Dead Redemption and all these other things. And I got a really nice letter from my agent from Dave Filoni's company and Lucasfilm saying, "We've always loved your characters and your things. We wanted to know, would you be interested in doing this villain character in Star Wars?" And I'm like, let me think. Yes, So I did not have to audition for it. And then it's super secret. I couldn't say anything. And it happened right before the writer's strike. So I went in and started recording, Dave Filoni was the supervisor. He was watching, he was directing the voiceover thing, and I met the woman that I was acting with on the day, and I had my character, and I had in my head, I was thinking, well, you know how Imperial soldiers and all of the original Star Wars in particular, they had an elegance about them, almost like senators in Spartacus. You can see Peter Ustinov being one of them, and so I told Dave Filoni, he like, well, so what do you have in mind for this? Because they wanted a character like that, and I said, well, I just watched Spartacus recently, and I was thinking like a Peter Ustinov, Olivier type character where he's like, "I'm sorry, I can't help you," and he goes, "Oh my God, that's what we want." That's exactly what I was thinking. He goes, we started talking about Spartacus, and finally they're like, we need to record Star Wars now. So we both stopped talking about Spartacus and just great British actors. And so Moff Isdain became my amalgam and take on someone who I knew every part, no matter how small in something that you're doing, is in service of the story. And you're trying to go, well, how can my character help convey the story and create this cool mood that they're trying to create with it? And for him, he's the roadblock, he's the bureaucracy, he's the guy who will listen to what you have to say and then go, no. You know, and so I thought, how do I make him deliciously kind of, aloof and whatever? And they were watching how my gestures were, which I think informed the animation in Tales of the Empire, like the way I carried myself while I'm doing it. And it just felt so good to be doing a Star Wars scene of anything and knowing it was in the canon, it was real, and my whole life was in preparation for that moment in a way, because all the little voices that you do as a kid, all the movies that you see and everything, if you're a professional, all that goes into you. And then when in the moment you're ready, you're like, I can do this. I know these characters. I know how to do this. And so it was very, you know what, Rory, it was validating, because you always go, would I be good enough to do something like that? And then to actually get a little chance to do it, to have your scene in that, they were super happy. They're like, "Oh, we got to bring you back. We got to do more stuff." And I was like, because what I always liken it to is if you liked, say you like the Beatles and you learn to play guitar and that's your style, like you write your own stuff, you always wonder, if I met them, would I be good enough to play? Would we get along? Would we like be able to do this together? And so for me, that was that moment where meeting him and doing that character, I was like, yeah, okay, these are my people. I can do this. And I've worked so hard over the years to get to that place, that one day is really the last 25 years of my life, just being in that moment and being able to do that character. That was everything. I just wanted it to be good. I wanted to be in the moment and be in service of that story.
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredible. And what's really cool as well is like you can also say that you didn't have to audition for the role. Like they had you in mind from the beginning. Like that's
Yeah, that was
brilliant.
blew my mind. I mean, come on. I fully expected I'd have to audition. So to get that really nice letter was very validating, because again, they probably heard something that I did that I worked my hardest on and tried to do my best job. But you never go, I'm going to do a really good job on this because somebody one day from Star Wars is going to hear this or something. So it's just, it teaches you a life lesson. It's like, do the best you can, and you never know who's going to see it.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. What were you told about the character of Moff Isdain when you went in for that recording session?
Well, we talked about it at first, and I go, Moff Isdane, what a great name. And he goes, yeah, exactly. He has disdain for everyone. And I was like, of course, disdain, Isdane. It makes complete sense. And then the important thing is, when you're acting in something like this, you want to know, like, what's the big picture? It's not just about me and like, I'm gonna do this and sound like this and do that. You look at it and you're like, oh, okay, I was looking at, well, her character gets frustrated with me. And the way that I fit into this is, Thrawn is above me and they see me as a tool. He's the guy who's like, don't pay any attention to him. He's the bureaucracy. And they don't understand. And so I put myself in the mindset of, if I was like one of these bureaucrats, who is like looking at the reviews like, no, we'll just take your idea, kind of thing. And so I thought, well, okay, he's in that mindset. And so the prep for it is, I just wanted to know tone. I think if you're trying to do a good job as an actor, the most important thing to ask is, what's the tone? Because you can be completely off. If it's comedic or it's dramatic or there's a sense of dread or something, you can play it a zillion different ways, but it's not all marching in the same direction until you go, now, what's the tone on this? Like, is it somewhat funny? Because you can read differently.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So, what are the similarities that you see between yourself and Moff Isdain, if any?
It's less similarities, it's more I understand people like that. Like I do see in corporate America, corporate world corporations, even in the UK, there are certain people whose job is to say no, and there's certain people whose job is to take advantage of people. Like they'll see someone with talent. I've had this happen as a writer. It's like, your script's really good. I wonder how I can rip it off. I wonder how I can steal it. And their creativity and their energy all go to how can they screw you over and out of something. So I thought, that's Moff Isdain. Moff Isdain is looking for talent and appreciates when he sees it, but his energy doesn't go to, I'm going to reward this talent. It's, how can I take that? And I can. And so once I had that mindset, he became a real person that we've all had to deal with. We've all had a boss at work where you're like, don't give him any ideas, he'll just steal it. You know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and yeah, Morgan Elsbeth was sure wasting energy giving it the idea
Yes,
to Isdane, said he just wanted the
exactly.
planet.
Exactly. And he made her feel like she could tell him, like he made her trust him enough that she could say what her plan was. And he's like, "Oh, that's good. I like that." So yeah, I could identify with him. The best Star Wars, you see reflections of mythology and the world and people that you kind of know. Even if they're an archetype of a person, you kind of know because the best stories you go, "Yeah, I'm either that guy or I know that guy."
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So, what was it like getting to play Moff Isdane and Villager number one? You've got an Imperial officer and an Aqualish species alien, both
Yes.
iconic parts of Star Wars going all the way back to A New Hope.
Yep, absolutely. Um, it really helped knowing the characters before because I was a fan of Star Wars. There was more shorthand of this is how those people act. These are how those characters sort of are in general. How do I make it my own? And then the sessions are very, very pleasant. They will show you the character, they'll show you sort of what it looks like or what you're doing, and then you have a very good discussion about how it fits into the whole story. And then you do takes, you get into your zone and you become that character and you start performing it, and then you get a little bit of feedback like, a little bit faster, or we need to fit this into that. The real nice thing about it was she was there, so you're not acting to no one, you're actually having a scene with a partner. So I call it bouncing. You can bounce back and forth between things, and I think a performance is changed by whether they're there and they're just doing their lines versus you're there and you can look the person in the eye and say things. I think it changes how your dynamic is, because if you're just saying them and you don't know what the other person's like or what they say back, it's different emotionally and just feels weird. If you were just saying questions to me and not hearing my answer, you would feel differently than us having this conversation. So the sessions where they were very smart to have more than one person there.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And that's something I've always liked with the Star Wars animated shows, like going back all the way to the Clone Wars in 2008. I know
Yeah.
Dave Filoni and the crew have always tried to get as many actors together as possible. So it's great to hear that, that's still happening.
Yeah, well, they're smart that way because they know creatively it does create that energy around being in the scene, and you don't feel alone. You don't feel like, I don't know, what's going on. And what's nice too is as you get to know the other person, you can play to their strengths. Like, they need to pause, or that, they're thinking a certain thing and they might say it, and you can surprise them with the way you reply. That sort of thing isn't in the script necessarily, it's in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So, can you tell me more about your reaction to being cast in Tales of the Empire? Like, was that just like a mind blowing moment for you?
It was mind blowing, but yeah, I'll tell you what was strange though is they ask you not to say anything until it comes out. So I wanted desperately to say, I just got put in this. And then the writer strike hit for 7 months. I couldn't say anything. So it was like having this secret that you all your life you want to just go, I got in this thing. I can't believe I finally, because it was the whole reason I moved to Los Angeles was around Star Wars. So to finally go, I'm canon, I'm in Star Wars, but you can't say anything. So it was a weird time because had there not been the writer's strike, it would have been, a couple months and then it comes out. But they paused everything long enough. In fact, I got a thing that fall going, hey, you're on hold in case we need to do more or whatever. And I was like, okay, I don't know when this is going to come out. Um, but it was so exciting. Like it was validating. My parents, both of my parents are still alive and out here. I had moved them here from the East Coast and telling them, mom, dad, I'm in Star Wars. They're like, what? And my mom, who's not that savvy with getting on the TV because they're both in their 90s, she literally went on and found the show and wanted to watch it with me. And the funniest thing happened. She's hard of hearing, like she has her deaf aids, and she didn't put them in, so she's watching, but she's not moving, and you can see her like watching it. And I go, Mom, that's me. She's like, no, that can't, that's Star Wars. And I'm like, Mom, that's me. That's me in Star Wars. And she's like, oh my God, I didn't recognize your voice. And so she went back and watched it again, but it was so funny because she just didn't move. And at first, my first thought was she doesn't like it. Just like, oh no, she doesn't like it. But it turns out she just didn't realize that was me.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows you were doing a really good job.
Yeah, I guess so. I disappeared into the sky. It's funny. I've been doing characters, American characters and UK characters. I spent a lot of time doing in the UK. In fact, one of the things that got me the job doing a comedy, I did a comedy TV show with John Cleese called The Art of Football. I used to do a two-hander, a two-man British sketch comedy show, and one of the producers of it saw me, and I think he had wanted originally to do it with Michael Palin as a special before the World Cup, but Michael couldn't do it and he couldn't get it. And they're like, well, who else do you know that can do, British comedy? And they're like, well, this guy Tom was pretty good and he's in LA and that's where John was living. So I drove up to John's house in Santa Barbara and met with him. We started doing 26 sketches. We had A through Z. We had a sketch for every letter of the alphabet. And that was another time where, having done sketch for almost 20 years, I was like, am I good enough? Because I did Beyond the Fringe. I did, I've done a lot of Peter Cook and Dudley Moore stuff and all this. Python was huge for me. And so, I look out the window and there's John looking out of the window of his study, waiting for my car to come in. And I was like, I'm about to do this. I'm going to meet John Cleese and then do sketch comedy with him. And that was also just amazing because I wasn't sure I'd be good enough for what I would do. So getting a thumbs up from John, or by the end of the shoot, he and I bonded and we're friends. We still talk to this day. That was another time where there's something about finding the people that you love their work. And if you are someone that also does it, taking all that inside you and making it your own and figuring out like, what's my voice and what do I do? And then meeting them later and being seen as an equal. Like I was paid to be there. It was just him and me. It's a two-man show. I don't know if you've seen any of it. You can see clips of it, I think, on YouTube. And The Art of Football was very validating because I got to do sketches with John Cleese.
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredible. And like in terms of what you were saying before with Moff Isdain, like you really created the voice. Like they didn't just give you just in terms of like, working on Star Wars, but you played a big part in creating the
Yes.
voice for Moff Isdain. Like, what was
Yes.
that like for you that they gave you such freedom to come up with the character process?
It felt amazing because when they give you some room to create the character, okay, we're on the same page. We want to create it. But I knew that once you have the voice, you have the attitude and you have the character. So because it wasn't coming from outside and they weren't going, we want this and play me a recording of what they want, it came from inside me. And so seeing Dave Filoni go, I like that, that was everything.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. So, what
Yeah.
was your experience like working on Tales of the Empire, and what has it meant to you to be part of Star Wars?
Yeah, it at the end of the day, it felt great because of two reasons. Now that I think of it, one, it brought me full circle in my life in a way that you couldn't write. young 10-year-old boy says he's the only child leaving his parents because of Star Wars. He says, I'm going to Los Angeles to try and make it. I have some things that I want to do and I want to say, and then risking everything. And even though it took almost, 30 years to get there, um, I sat there and I looked around and I went, I am in Star Wars. I finally made it, which means we all can make it. If we stick with it and you truly want it, don't give up. There is never a time. The only time you fail is when you just stop trying. And I tried my whole life. And so I finally got a chance to be in the thing that made me live here and have my entire life out here, was started by loving Star Wars. And I looked around last year and I went, I'm here.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. And what did you enjoy the most about playing Isdane?
You know what? I enjoyed the most seeing it for the first time after the animation and stuff was put in. Performing it was amazing and lovely, but seeing it together with the music and the way it looked and the way the character was, and being able to enjoy it with my friends. My son is in college, and he goes, Dad, we just watched it in the dorm. And I said to myself, this is so weird that I hear my dad in Star Wars. That made it worth it.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's like, parenting goals, and that
Exactly. It's like, wow, my dad's in Star Wars. Yeah. So yeah, he watched episode 2, and he called me right after he did. So I would say that's the best moment, is when my son Sean said, I couldn't believe, I looked around at my friends and I went, my dad's in Star Wars.
yeah, absolutely. Above all else, now you're cool. Now you're absolutely cool to him.
I have a little bit of cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
He might disagree, but yes, in that moment it felt cool.
Yeah, well, look at it this way: if he ever like disrespects you or something, or does what a
That's right.
child does sometimes, you just remind him, "I'm in
That's
Star
right.
Wars.
I'm in
I'm an
Star
Imperial
Wars.
officer."
That's right. Yeah, I'll discipline you like an Imperial officer. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, that was probably the best part, was that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And what did you enjoy the most about playing Moff Isdain?
Um, you know what? I got to be Anytime you're the villain, it's always delicious. And playing Moff Isdane for me was a chance to play one of those, like we had said a little bit earlier, like a senator almost in the original, Stanley Kubrick Spartacus, where he's this sort of elegant, distant figure. And I got to do a voice that I had created, and I love playing those characters. And I think for me, it was, what can I do with this to make the story as good as possible, and what would I want to see in Star Wars from this villain? And it's like, that's the voice, that's the attitude. It takes you back to, Peter Cushing and all the classic villains. I even had Alan Rickman in my head from Die Hard, and so for me, that moment of being able to throw it down and knowing it was actually going somewhere, like it was actually going to air, it was actually going to be in something, instead of just, hanging out and going, oh, I'm going to play this character and just, hopefully someone hears it. Knowing that it had a point and that you were doing it in Star Wars was everything.
Yeah, that's brilliant. What kind of direction were you given from Dave Filoni for playing Isdane?
Mostly just encouragement. You could tell by his face and the way he was at the end of a take. You could tell he was like, "Yeah, that's it," And if you move on after a few, and if there was something in particular, he was very clear. He knows exactly what he wants, and so he was super clear. And Dave Filoni told me exactly what I needed to know without controlling it too much or making me feel shut down, where you're shut down, like, oh, just tell me what you want. I don't know what I'm doing. He encouraged me to be more of what I thought it needed and what it wanted. And because we were on the same page, it became a kind of effortless back and forth like tennis.
Yeah, that's brilliant. What would you say are your favorite memories from your time working on Tales of the Empire?
I think working on it, that my favorite memory was the time that I got to spend with Dave Filoni actually creating it, and then my other favorite memory is definitely watching it for the first time with family and being able to share that story of how I came out here because of Star Wars.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. What would you say were the biggest challenges you faced working on Tales of the Empire?
Just making sure that I got it right, you know. I think anytime you approach a production, like for example, I do this Mindstream Radio Reborn thing, and it's the same sort of challenge. Is what I'm doing going to reach the audience the way that I want? Are the characters, interesting? Is what I'm doing as a performer connecting with the story? Am I serving it? The biggest challenge is always, who do I have to become to make the story as good as possible?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So, how does it feel to have been part of an amazing Star Wars animated show for Disney Plus and Tales of the Empire?
It feels so good. And the fact that you reached out to me is the whole point, of feeling good about doing it, is that someone like you who enjoys it, it makes it all worth it to say, oh, Tom, I liked what you did with that, and I enjoyed watching it. And it feels satisfying, and it does feel like my life came full circle in a way that I didn't know I'd have closure. You know what I mean? Like closure to my life. Like, would I have been good enough to even do, this small part and be a small part of Star Wars? Am I good enough? Will I have what it takes? And at the end of the day, it worked out. I got to do it, and I found out that I was able to do it. And for you to come back to me and say I enjoyed it is the whole point of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. So Star Wars, of course, has a lot of upcoming content on Disney Plus, with more The Acolyte, Ahsoka, and Andor, plus other shows coming up like Skeleton Crew. As a Star
Yep.
Wars fan yourself, are there any characters you would like to see get Star Wars shows?
Oh, wow. You know, it would be interesting to look at some of the other mercenary characters, like ones that were kind of they've been on the fringes of some of these stories, but it would be a lot of fun to explore. I always thought instead of doing a movie where they just did a one-off prequel kind of Han Solo, I always thought his adventures before he met Luke would have been interesting because he had different clients every time. He was a smuggler. He would have met different people. So I think you could have had a show where you see him grow as a person, or you see a show where he gets more cynical. So you go, well, how did he end up this kind of broken mercenary guy? Um, you could have done it more effectively, I think, in a television and even an animated show where he looked like Harrison Ford. You can make him look more like Harrison. You could have done something with Han Solo, I think, where his story naturally flows, that he would be meeting different people. And it would be interesting to see a little bit more of him than just the sort of origin story that they did. Because in a movie, you only have 2 hours. But it would be interesting, I think, to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
loved Solo myself, but at the
Yeah.
same time, it's also like it's an origin. It's like, in between the prequels and the originals, like
Right.
about 10 years. So there's still
Right.
like, 5, 10 years before A New Hope.
Before exactly, and that's my whole point. I would love to see how he became that cynical smuggler, what he had to deal with, who he ran into, because he had opinions about the Force and Jedi. I was like, well, how did he get those opinions? So it would be interesting to see a TV show about Han.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So your other credits include the likes of Safety Geeks, SVI, Invention of Brian Forbes, Ask Grim, and many others. Which have been your favorite roles in your career so far?
Um, Well, I love doing the comedy show with John Cleese, but Trouble is My Business actually was my first feature film that I directed. I've been a filmmaker my whole life. I've made a lot of films for other people. I've directed a lot of television stage shows, but I call it I've always been a waiter as far as doing features and never owned the restaurant. And so for Trouble is My Business, I said, you know what? I'm going to make a love letter to film noir and use the story techniques from the 1940s, because those films didn't have a lot of money, back in the 40s. They had to make a lot, that's why they were so dark. They didn't have sets they could light. They had to light faces, and they had to have ideas that were very cynical. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to do what indie film now can be, which is a film noir where it's lean and you don't have a lot of money in sets. So I came up with a story I thought worked for Trouble Is My Business, and I called in, my markers of actors that I work with and known, like Vernon Wells, who was actually the first celebrity I ever met in Los Angeles. I was working in a store for some money for Christmas help, and I was really young. I just moved out here, and Vernon walked in, and this was right after he had done Weird Science, and I knew him from The Road Warrior because that was the first movie R-rated movie I saw, and I walked up to him and I said, "One day, I'm gonna do a movie with you," and he goes, "Yeah, kid, right." And sure enough, 25 years later, I looked up at him and I said, "I told you I was gonna work with you." So that was really satisfying, and I love playing Roland Drake because I always wanted to play a detective like that. I loved Out of the Past and Maltese Falcon and Chinatown, and there's something about, I call them knights in rusted armor. They're good men, but they're under all this sort of cynical life, and they feel beaten down, or they pick the wrong people, and they run into a wall with the femme fatale or the woman. So I tried to pour everything I could into that, and I think it turned out pretty good. And it actually is the launching pad for the next movies I want to do, like Island in the Stars, which is also with Vernon, which is an Australian production. We'll bring in some amazing Australian actors and things that we're putting together right now. In fact, there's an Indiegogo. I don't know if I sent you the link, I think.
Yep.
We have an ongoing campaign where people can buy the ticket now and get perks, perks to be part of the whole process of making the movie. And that will likely be the next feature that I make.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And that Vernon Wells story is just so brilliant though.
You
You
can't write that.
yeah, you kept up to your word. You got him
That's right.
standing there working for you.
I know. It's amazing. And he's a sweetheart. He's a wonderful man. He plays villains so well because he understands them. But in real life, he's one of the finest humans I know.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Have you got any other favorite memories from any of your non-Star Wars work?
Yeah, oh yeah. Doing the sketches, I loved doing the sketches. Doing comedy, Invention with Brian Forbes is a two-hander. It's won a bunch of awards. It was an online series. It's actually on a streaming company right now here, a big one called Tubi TV, called Tubi. It's called Invention with Brian Forbes, and I love that character. You'll have to check it out. I don't know if you guys get Tubi. I think Tubi's going to be coming to the UK. So you can check it out. And another thing that recently has been really rewarding is these Flash Gordon comedy shows. I love the original Flash Gordon radio series, and it just went in the public domain because they started making it in 1933, and that's the limit. In 2023, things go in the public domain from then, and now we're in 2024. So I went back and I said, what do I love about these? So I sort of did a Naked Gun Monty Python version of Flash Gordon, and we've done 10 episodes. And I write them, I edit them, I do the sound effects, I bring in all these terrific professional actors that I work with, and it's a blast. If you get a chance, take a listen to some of the Flash Gordon, but also one that I'm super proud of is a funny version of Scrooge called the Festivus Incident. I originally was an idea that I had come up with for Scooby for a Christmas special, where he was haunted by a bunch of ghosts, and the gang, the Scooby gang, keeps solving the ghost mystery, so Scrooge learns nothing. Uh, and then I thought, you know what? I want to create something else with that idea. So I went and did a different idea for Scrooge, and it turned out beautifully. I'm so happy with it. It's won a bunch of audio awards, but it's called Scrooge: The Festivus Incident. So you have to give it a listen.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So outside of acting, you've also done a lot of filmmaking work, like as a director, writer, producer, editor, and other behind the scenes works. What
Mhm.
inspired you to want to do filmmaking as well?
I would say just I love to create the whole universe, not just be an actor sometimes. Sometimes an actor, like I say, it's in service of someone else's story. You have no control over the music, how it's going to be edited, how it's going to look. You do your best and hope that they have you. I've been creating my own stuff, and since I was, 10 or 11 years old, and I enjoy it, and I like the technical, and I understand it fairly well. I've been editing for 30 years. I know cinematography. I know the mechanics of filmmaking. I have a production company called Lumenactus Productions Incorporated in Burbank, and we produce independent film and video. And I've been doing that a very long time, going back to music videos, back in the 90s. And so for me, it's a pleasure because the level of world building and the level of creativity that you can put in, if I understand everybody's job and how best to do it, I can talk their language. I can talk to the costume person. I can talk to the editor. I can talk to the people that do post production and understand it. The music is so important. I'm a freak for soundtracks, movie soundtracks. So there's a list of people that I love to work with. There's this guy Joe Kramer who did Rogue Nation, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. He's actually scoring something right now. He and I have become great friends. He's worked with John Williams. So, I think I enjoy being involved in all of it in the big picture, in the big overview of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. Which production that you did filmmaking on are you most proud of?
Definitely Trouble is my business so far. I learned so much in doing that and trying to make a lot out of a little. I learned that my brain now is wrapped around directing a feature film. I learned all of the mechanics you need to do to distribute it. I would say it's the most satisfying that I feel like that was an accomplishment. And once you have that, people don't go, well, can he make a film and will it be any good? Now the next conversation is, what do you want to make next?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's the best, next question to get is,
Yeah.
you've got the first
What's
thing
next?
done. Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
let's keep it going, and work
Yeah,
on what's
exactly.
next.
Yeah, that was the most rewarding, definitely.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So, which has been the most challenging role in your career so far? Can be for acting, filmmaking, etc.
Um, I think, well, there's two experiences that were challenging. I think doing live shows is always been challenging as an actor because there's no buffer between you and the audience. And I used to do much longer shows, like I did Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat, which is literally being on stage talking for, hour and a half nonstop by yourself. And hanging it out there makes me appreciate what it is to feel like an actor and feel when you're being directed by somebody, how it feels to be hanging it out there and connecting with the audience. It was a huge challenge, in memorization and getting that down. The other challenge that I felt is just getting independent projects produced. Finding the money is it's the least fun thing to do is finding money to do it. It's sort of a you have to have it. Unfortunately, you have to have money to pay people and to pay for the resources, but it's the least often the least creative unless you make it creative. You think, well, how creatively can I get the money and how do I put myself in a mindset that I can make it clear to someone who has money that by supporting this project or putting money into it, they can make money because that's their language. My goal is to create a story. Their goal is to turn their money into more money. And so I would say the biggest challenge, I spend too much time looking for money for doing the next thing. And I want to shorten that to where you have an idea on Monday and you're able to execute it on Friday. That would be the ideal. That's the challenge.
Yeah, that's completely fair. So, my
Yeah.
final question for you, Tom, do you have any upcoming acting roles, filmmaking projects, or any other projects you would like to talk about?
Absolutely. I just filmed an episode of Bosch Legacy, which is going to be on Amazon. It's the Harry Bosch television series. I have a part in that. That's in season 3, which is coming out pretty soon. Um, I have a video game which I can't mention just yet, but I played a very big role in a video game that's coming out, and maybe I'll come back to you and talk about it when it comes out. You have to sign a non-disclosure when you're doing it because you can't talk about the video game before it comes out. And then the other thing I would encourage people to take a look at is take a look at Island in the Stars. That's going to be my next ambitious science fiction steampunk um, adventure, and it's like a sort of Jules Verne, Treasure Island, Ray Harryhausen adventure. It's old school, just straight up having a good time and going on an adventure, and it's very positive and not dark really at all. So take a look at that on the page, and if it interests you, everyone take a look at it. And there are perks that you can participate in behind the scenes, or meet us, or just get involved in it in some way. Any money that goes to that goes to our offers to some terrific big name actors that we're going to get to be in the film, and we want to be filming it next year in Melbourne.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. Yeah, sounds amazing. And so that's all of my questions for you today, Tom. It's been a pleasure talking to you on the
Thank you.
podcast.
Thank you, Rory. I really appreciate it. I was really grateful when you reached out. You're doing a terrific job, and it's just a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, and hopefully we can talk again sometime.
I would like that. Let's do
Brilliant,
that.
brilliant, brilliant. So I look forward to talking to you again, Tom. Thanks again for joining us today, and take care. Bye.
Thank you.